I see you there, sitting alone with your pain, the space beside you empty where someone once sat, the photos that no longer have stories to tell, the phone that does not ring, the friends who disappeared like shadows at noon. Your heart carries this void like an invisible weight, pressing against your ribs when you try to sleep. You wonder if this loneliness is a sentence without end. I have walked this path. I have felt the desert wind of abandonment sweep through my bones. And I tell you now, what appears to be your deepest wound will become your most sacred doorway. The emptiness that feels like punishment is already filling with a presence beyond what was lost. Stay with me. I will show you how. I remember the night in Kenya when everyone I loved seemed distant as stars. My teacher had departed, my family looked upon me with confusion, and the scholars of the city whispered that I had lost my way. I sat alone in my chamber, the oil lamp casting my shadow large and strange against the wall. I felt as if I had been hollowed out, my chest an empty vessel that could hold nothing but grief. Have you felt this too? This sensation that solitude is not just a condition, but a room with no doors, a space where your breath seems to echo back to you with no one to receive it. I ran my fingers across the prayer rug, feeling its familiar texture, wondering if God too had moved beyond my reach. The tears came then, not as relief, but as evidence of my broken state. I was a man of faith who suddenly could not feel the presence of the divine. I was a teacher who had no wisdom to give himself. That is when I noticed something strange about the shadows in my room. They moved with a rhythm that did not match the flickering lamp. They danced, almost imperceptibly at first, then with increasing certainty. I watched, transfixed, as the darkness itself seemed to pulse with life. And then I understood. What I had been calling absence was in fact a deeper form of presence. What I had named abandonment was actually an invitation to a more profound companionship. God had not moved away. God had moved inside. The beloved was no longer to be found in the forms I had grown accustomed to, but in the very emptiness I feared. This is what I must tell you now. Loneliness is not a sign of God's absence, but a clearing for God's arrival. When the familiar voices grow silent, a more ancient voice can finally be heard. When human companions step away, the eternal companion draws nearer. The pain you feel is real. I would never diminish it with false comfort. The chair where your mother once sat remains empty. The spouse who shared your bed has gone. The child who filled your home with noise has moved to a distant city. The friends who promised forever have found other circles. This is the honest weight of your days. But that weight is not the final truth of your life. I learned in those solitary hours that the heart has chambers we cannot access when filled with lesser loves. There are doors within us that open only when external doors close. This is not to glorify suffering or to suggest that your pain is somehow deserved. No, this is simply the recognition that the human journey sometimes requires a passage through terrain that feels forsaken. You have not been abandoned by the divine. You have been entrusted with a particular initiation. Solitude is not your enemy. It is your temporary teacher. Let me share a practice that sustained me during my own season of isolation. Each morning, before the demands of the day could scatter my attention, I would sit in silence for the time it takes a candle to burn down the length of my finger. I would place my hand upon my heart and speak these words within. I am not alone. The beloved dwells within this very aloneness. I would breathe slowly, feeling the rise and fall of my chest beneath my palm. With each breath, I would imagine drawing the presence of God deeper into the empty spaces within me. I did not try to escape my loneliness. I made it my sanctuary. And gradually, like water seeping into parched soil, a new kind of companionship began to form around the very wound I thought would never heal. Try this yourself. For just 3 minutes each morning, place your palm over your heart, breathe slowly and repeat within yourself, Estoy en la presencia divina, aún en mi soledad. Feel the warmth of your own hand. Notice the faithful rhythm of your heart that continues its work even in your darkest hours. This is not a magical cure for the legitimate grief of loss. It is instead a small door that opens to a larger room within you, a room where different companions await. In the markets of Kanya, I once saw a peculiar merchant who sold empty vessels. When asked what they contained, he would smile and say, "Space for whatever you most need." People laughed, thinking him a fool or a fraud, but I saw the wisdom in his eyes. Our emptiness is our capacity. Our hollowed places are our future fullness. The friend who does not call, the family member who turned away, the spouse who left, they have unknowingly created in you a space that something more essential has been waiting to fill. The divine presence that seems so distant is already within you, quiet as dawn, patient as mountains. I composed these words during my own time of solitude. The cup that has been emptied completely can finally hold the wine that changes everything. Your emptiness is not a punishment. It is preparation. The most profound connections of your life may still lie ahead, waiting for the space that is being created in you now. Trust this process, not with blind faith, but with the faith that comes from placing one foot before the other on a path you cannot fully see. The beloved has not abandoned you. The beloved has simply changed form, moving from what was familiar to what is essential. Remember this truth that contradicts what the world has taught you. Absence is not the opposite of presence. It is presence in its most subtle and powerful form. The very thing you think has been taken from you is being offered in a purer state without the distractions and limitations of its previous shape. This is why the greatest spiritual masters often emerge from periods of profound solitude. This is why the desert has birthed more prophets than the city. What feels like abandonment is actually the beginning of a deeper belonging. Let your loneliness be honest. Let your tears fall when they need to. Let your hands reach out when they must. But know that with each honest acknowledgement of your pain, you are also acknowledging the space where new life is already taking root. The order of the universe has not been disrupted by your loss. A deeper order is being established within you. An order that can weather any storm, because it is founded not on the changing weather of human attachment, but on the unchanging ground of divine presence. Each night before sleep claims you, place one small item beside your bed that represents order in your life. It might be a smooth stone, a book of prayers, a family photograph, or any object that reminds you that not everything has been lost. This simple practice anchors your heart in the continuity that persists even when relationships change. It reminds you that beyond the chaos of human emotion, a sacred pattern holds you in its weave. Touch this object before closing your eyes. Let it be the last sensation your fingers know before dreams arrive. In this way, you build a bridge between your conscious pain and the healing that continues while you rest. I have seen the hollow eyes of the one who returns to what destroys him. I have felt the weight of that shame like stones in a pocket, pulling you deeper into waters that promise relief, but deliver only temporary forgetting. The substance that once gave wings to your spirit now clips those wings with ruthless precision. The drink that once loosened your tongue now ties it into knots of regret. The habit that promised freedom has become your prison. And here you are again, starting from the beginning, counting days like a miser counts coins, wondering if this time the counting will continue, or if, like so many times before, you will find yourself back at zero, your promises scattered like ashes around your feet. On a desert journey from Damascus to Kanya, I encountered a man who had lost everything to his thirst for wine. His family had cast him out, his reputation lay in ruins, and his hands trembled with the memory of the cup they could not refuse. When our caravan stopped for the night, he sat apart from the others, shame a visible cloak around his shoulders. I brought him water and sat beside him in silence as the stars emerged overhead. After a long while, he spoke. "I have tried to leave this path 100 times," he said. "Each time I believe I am finally free, but then I hear the call again, and my feet move as if they belong to another." I asked him where he thought that call originated. He pointed to his throat, to the burning there that never seemed to cool, but I gently took his hand and placed it over his heart. "The thirst is here," I said, "and it is for something far deeper than what you have been drinking." I know the cycle of determination and defeat that has become so familiar to you, the promises you make in moments of clarity that dissolve when the cravings return, the shame that follows each fall, heavier each time, telling you that transformation is for others but not for you. I know how it feels to believe your weakness is your identity, that your failures define you more than your aspirations. But listen carefully to what I am about to tell you. The very substance, habit, or behavior you return to is not your enemy. It is a misguided messenger, a confused guide trying to lead you to what your soul truly craves. Your addiction is not evidence of your worthlessness. It is evidence of your deep and genuine hunger for connection, for meaning, for the divine presence that seems to have withdrawn from your life. I want to ask you something, and I ask you to be honest with me and yourself. What is the moment that always comes before the relapse? That precise instant when something in you gives way. Is it a particular feeling you cannot bear to feel? A thought that circles like a vulture? A loneliness that opens like a pit beneath your feet? If this question touches something real inside you, if you recognize this pattern in yourself, write in the comments, "I fall when I feel," and name that trigger with complete honesty. When you share this, you're not just naming your own struggle, you're extending a hand to countless others walking the same path in silence. Your courage to speak truth may be the exact medicine another soul has been searching for today. The most profound teaching about renewal came to me not in a mosque or from a sacred text, but from watching a tree in Kenya that had been struck by lightning. Half its trunk was charred black, a jagged wound running from roots to crown. The local children called it the dead tree and avoided it in their play. But one spring morning, I noticed something extraordinary. From the blackest part of the trunk, a single green shoot had emerged. By summer, that shoot had become a branch with leaves that danced in the slightest breeze. The tree had not denied its wound or hidden it beneath bark. Instead, it had grown directly through the damaged place, incorporating the injury into its new form. This is what I learned from that resilient tree. True recovery does not erase your wounds, it grows through them. The path forward is not to pretend you were never broken, but to allow a new kind of strength to form around and through the very places where you were most damaged. The most beautiful vessel in a potter's collection is often the one that cracked in the firing and was mended with gold, its repair becoming its most distinctive feature. So, it can be with you. Your repeated attempts, your falls and risings are not failures, but necessary steps in forging a strength that those who have never struggled cannot comprehend. Here is a practice that saved me in my darkest hour, when I believed I had strayed too far to ever find my way back to God's grace. Each morning, take a small cup of water in your hands, hold it before you and speak these words aloud. Today I begin again. My past has shaped me, but does not define me. The divine presence flows through me like this water, cleansing what needs to be cleansed, nourishing what needs to grow. Then drink the water slowly, feeling its coolness, its life-giving quality. This simple ritual acknowledges both your need for daily renewal and the ever-present resource that makes that renewal possible. It is not magical thinking. It is the physical enactment of a spiritual truth that each moment offers a fresh beginning, regardless of how many beginnings you have squandered before. During my years of teaching in Kenya, a woman visited me weekly to report her failures in controlling her anger. Each time, the story was similar. She had resolved to respond with patience to her difficult mother-in-law, but each time the familiar words would provoke the familiar rage, and she would find herself shouting, then weeping with shame at her lack of progress. After many such visits, I asked her to bring me a perfectly ripe pear from the market. When she returned with it, I asked her to describe how the pear had reached such perfect ripeness. She looked confused, then replied that it had grown slowly, nourished by sun and rain and soil, following its natural timing. Your transformation follows the same law, I told her. It ripens at its own pace, not at the pace of your impatience. The fact that you continue to return here, week after week, despite your falls, that is not failure. That is the invisible growth that precedes the visible change. I offer you this truth that contradicts what shame would have you believe. Your relapses are not evidence that you cannot change. They are part of how you are changing. Each time you fall and rise again, you learn something essential about the terrain of your own heart. You map the precise locations of your vulnerabilities. You discover which paths lead back to old habits and which lead toward freedom. This is knowledge you cannot gain through theory or through the experiences of others. It must be earned through your own stumbling journey. And that journey, with all its detours and reversals, is itself sacred. The divine presence does not abandon you in your falls. It draws closer, gathering data, so to speak, about exactly what kind of help you most require. I created this saying during a time when one of my closest disciples had returned to a destructive pattern I thought he had overcome. God loves most tenderly the one who rises for the 100th time, for in that rising is a trust more pure than any perfect performance. Hold these words in your heart when shame tells you that you have exhausted your supply of fresh starts. The truth is that new beginnings never run out. The divine account is never overdrawn. The mercy that matters most is not diminished by your repeated need for it. Tonight, before you sleep, place your hands palms up on your lap and imagine placing all your failures, your broken promises, your relapses, your shame into those open hands. Feel their weight. Acknowledge their reality without minimizing or exaggerating. Then, with a simple movement, turn your palms downward, releasing their contents into a current of compassion that flows beneath all human struggle. This is not denying responsibility. It is recognizing that carrying yesterday's weight into tomorrow only increases the likelihood of stumbling again. Each night, empty your hands. Each morning, fill them anew with intention rather than regret. In this rhythm of release and renewal, you will find the strength that comes not from perfect performance, but from faithful return to the path, no matter how many times you may wander from it. The weight of providing sits heavy on your shoulders. I see you counting coins in the darkness before dawn, dividing too little among too many needs, the rent that increases while your income remains the same, the children who need shoes, books, medicine, the debts that multiply like shadows as the sun descends. You work hours that stretch beyond human capacity, and still the numbers refuse to align. You wonder if God sees this struggle, if the divine hand that feeds the birds has somehow overlooked your nest. Your prayers have become questions, and your questions have become accusations, and beneath it all runs a current of fear, so constant you barely distinguish it from your own heartbeat. I, too, have known the midnight mathematics of scarcity. As a young teacher in Kenya, with students who depended on me and a family to shelter, there were seasons when the flour bin held dust instead of bread. I remember one winter when the cold entered our home like an unwelcome guest who refused to leave, and we had no wood to warm our bodies or food to fuel them from within. My children looked to me with eyes that asked questions I could not answer. My wife maintained a brave expression that cracked only when she thought I wasn't watching. And I, the one who spoke of God's abundance to all who would listen, found myself wondering if those words were just poetry, after all, beautiful sounds signifying nothing. One particularly desperate morning, I walked to the marketplace not to buy, for my pockets were empty, but simply to be among people, to escape the silence of our bare home. An old man sat on a stone bench, feeding crumbs to sparrows that gathered at his feet. The birds ate without hesitation, without concern for tomorrow's crumbs. They simply received what was offered in the present moment, then flew to nearby branches where they burst into a song as if the few crumbs had been a feast. I sat beside the man, and he offered me some of the bread to feed to the birds. As I extended my hand, the sparrows came directly to my palm, their tiny feet a tickling miracle against my skin. "They know exactly who will feed them," the old man said, "and who will not." In that moment, something shifted within me. Not my circumstances. When I returned home, the flour bin was still empty, the hearth still cold. But my vision had altered. I began to notice provision that had been invisible to me before. A neighbor brought a pot of soup, accidentally made too much. A student's family sent extra blankets they claimed they no longer needed, Small gestures, easily dismissed as coincidence, but viewed through new eyes, they formed a pattern of attention that defied my isolation. The universe was not ignoring our need. It was responding through channels I had been too proud or too afraid to recognize. This is the first truth I offer you about material provision. The divine economy operates by different mathematics than the marketplace. It calculates abundance not by accumulation, but by circulation. When you grasp and hoard out of fear, the flow diminishes. When you receive and offer with open hands, the current strengthens. This is not magical thinking. It is the practical observation that generosity, even from apparent scarcity, creates connections through which provision can travel. The widow who shared her last meal with the prophet did not do so because she had extra, but because she understood that closed hands cannot receive, even from God. I watched a master weaver in the bazaar of Damascus create patterns of astonishing complexity from individual threads that, seen alone, were quite ordinary. When I asked about his process, he told me, "I never focus on a single thread or even a single color. I hold the entire design in my vision, and each thread finds its place within that larger pattern. Your financial struggles are genuine. The numbers that refuse to add up cause real suffering. But they are single threads in a fabric being woven across time through your life. The full pattern includes more than today's scarcity. It includes the strength and wisdom you are developing through this challenge, the compassion for others that is being refined in you, and provision that is already moving toward you through channels you cannot yet perceive." If these words are touching something deep in you, if you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here, I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you. Let me offer a simple practice that sustained me during my own financial desert. Each morning, before engaging with any practical matters, I would hold my open hands before me and speak this blessing. My hands are instruments of giving and receiving. Through them flows all that is needed. For this day, not excess but enough, not luxury but dignity. I trust the source that feeds the sparrows and clothes the lilies. This is not denying the reality of your bills or the legitimate needs of those who depend on you. It is placing those realities within a larger context of trust and attention. It is acknowledging that while you must take practical action, your ultimate security lies beyond your own capacity to provide. During the worst of my financial trials, a wealthy merchant who had heard me teach invited me to his home. I expected he might offer assistance, and my pride both resisted and secretly hoped for this. Instead, he showed me his private garden, where he spent 1 hour each day in silence. "This hour has saved me," he confided. "Not my wealth, not my reputation, but this practice of stepping outside the marketplace mentality to remember what truly sustains life." He explained that even in his abundance, he had lived with a persistent fear of loss until he established this daily sanctuary in time. "Now I give more generously than before," he said, "because I know my wealth is not in my coffers, but in my connection to the source of all provision. I urge you to create such a sanctuary, even if it can only be 15 minutes before others awaken or after they sleep. Find a space where commercial concerns cannot follow, where your value is not calculated by your income or measured by your debts. This is not escaping reality. It is accessing a deeper reality that puts financial struggles in proper perspective. Just as regular meals sustain the physical body, regular periods of sanctuary sustain the spirit that must face material challenges. Without this counterbalance, financial pressure becomes not just a practical problem, but an all-consuming identity. You are not your bank balance. You are not your job title or lack thereof. You are a being of infinite worth, whose temporary passage through financial difficulty does not diminish your essential value or connection to the divine. Consider this spiritual principle that challenges conventional wisdom. True wealth is not in what you accumulate, but in what you can live without. I do not say this to romanticize poverty, which brings genuine suffering, nor to dismiss your legitimate need for material stability. I say it as a practical observation of those I have known who discovered, through seasons of scarcity, an inner abundance that no market fluctuation could diminish. They learned to distinguish between authentic needs and conditioned wants. They found joy in simple pleasures that cost nothing: conversation, prayer, the taste of water when truly thirsty, the relief of rest after honest labor. They developed a relationship with material things that was neither attached nor rejecting, but rather appropriately appreciative. In my darkest financial hour, when creditors were literally at my door, I composed these words that I now offer to you. The empty pocket reveals what hands were made for, not merely holding, but reaching, working, giving, receiving, and at day's end, folding in prayer. Your financial challenges are teaching you something essential about your own nature and about the true source of security. The learning is painful, yes, but it is also valuable beyond measure. You are discovering capacities for creativity, resilience, and trust that would have remained dormant in easier circumstances. Each evening this week, I invite you to write down 3 specific provisions that came to you during the day. They need not be financial. They might be a moment of unexpected beauty, a kind word, a solution to a problem, a memory that gave strength. This practice gradually shifts attention from what is lacking to what is given, without denying the reality of your struggles. It trains the eye to recognize support that comes in forms you might otherwise overlook. Like learning any new skill, this way of seeing requires regular practice, but over time, it reveals an invisible system of provision that has been operating all along beneath the more visible systems that have failed you. The order you seek will not arrive through sudden financial windfall, though that might come. More likely, it will emerge through this daily discipline of recognizing provision that already surrounds you, of distinguishing between true needs and manufactured wants, of finding within yourself resources of patience and creativity that no bank can repossess. This is the faith that does not ignore practical reality, but places it within a larger pattern of meaning and connection. This is the discipline that does not deny the genuine pain of scarcity, but refuses to grant it power over your essential identity and worth. Your mind has become your prison. I see you there, pacing the perimeter of your own thoughts, tracing the same worn path until it becomes a trench from which you cannot climb. Anxiety wraps itself around your chest like a vine choking a tree. Guilt whispers its accusations when you try to rest, reminding you of every misstep, every wrong turn, every opportunity wasted. And between these two tormentors stands stagnation, a gray and heavy presence that turns your days into a single endless moment where nothing changes, nothing grows, nothing moves forward. You think and think but never act. You plan but never begin. You dream but never build. And beneath it all runs the terrible question: is this all there is? Will my life remain forever caught between what might have been and what never was? I know this prison intimately. In the years following my beloved Shams's disappearance, I entered a labyrinth of the mind from which I could see no exit. Each thought connected to another in an endless maze of questioning, doubt, and self-recrimination. Why had I not protected him? Why had I spoken of our friendship so openly, inviting the jealousy that led to his loss? What could I have done differently? What should I do now? These questions circled like birds of prey, their shadows darkening my heart until I could barely rise from my sleeping mat to perform the most basic duties of life. My students would arrive for instruction, and I would stare at them as if across a vast distance, unable to remember what wisdom I had once possessed that they believed I could impart. One morning, as dawn broke over Konya and the call to prayer echoed from the minarets, I sat in my chamber watching dust motes dance in the beam of light that fell through my window. I had been sitting thus for hours, paralyzed by the weight of my own mind. Suddenly, a small bird flew through the open window, circled the room in evident panic, then exited again into the free air. Its brief captivity and subsequent release struck me with the force of revelation. My thoughts were like that room, I realized. They appeared to be the whole world only because I had forgotten to look out the window. They seemed to be reality itself only because I had been staring at them so long I had forgotten they were merely thoughts, not truth. In that moment, I recognized a fundamental error in my approach. I'd been trying to think my way out of overthinking. I had been attempting to solve the problem of my mind with more mind, like trying to extinguish fire with fire. What was needed was not more analysis, but a complete shift in attention. Not a better map of the labyrinth, but the recognition that there was a sky above it. I rose from my seated position, my limbs stiff from immobility, and walked outside into the garden where the morning light bathed every leaf and stone in gold. I knelt and pressed my hands into the cool earth, feeling its solid presence against my palms. This was not a thought, but a direct experience, unmediated by mental commentary. And in that simple contact, I felt something within me shift from abstraction to presence, from story to reality. This is the first truth I offer about liberation from the prison of your mind. Thought cannot free itself. Something else must intervene, something more primary and less complicated. That something is direct sensory experience of the present moment. When you are caught in the web of anxiety about tomorrow or guilt about yesterday, your body remains stubbornly in the now. It continues to breathe, to see, to hear, to touch. And in that basic sensory awareness lies the key that unlocks the door of your mental prison. Not by fighting your thoughts or trying to silence them, but by gently shifting attention to what is actually happening right here, right now, in the realm of direct perception. Let me share a practice that became my lifeline during that dark period. Each time I noticed myself caught in the spiral of overthinking, I would stop whatever I was doing and deliberately bring my attention to 3 specific sensations: the feeling of my feet against the ground, the movement of breath in my body, and one sound in my environment. I would name these sensations silently to myself: feet pressing, chest rising, birds calling. This simple act would immediately bring me from the abstract realm of thought to the concrete reality of present experience. From there, I could move forward, even if only to complete the next small action before me. I did not try to silence my mind or force positive thoughts. I simply shifted attention from mental activity to physical presence, and in that shift, found the space to move again. In the bazaar of Damascus, I once watched a potter working his clay upon the wheel. His apprentice stood nearby, clearly agitated, shifting from foot to foot, his face a mask of worry. When the master paused in his work, the young man blurted out his concerns about a debt he owed, a relationship that had soured, a future that seemed increasingly uncertain. The potter listened patiently, then beckoned the apprentice to the wheel. He placed the young man's hands on the wet clay and guided them in the rhythmic motion of creation. "Feel that?" he asked. The apprentice nodded, visibly calming as his attention moved from his tangled thoughts to the immediate sensation of clay forming beneath his fingers. "The mind spins like this wheel," the potter said, "but you are the one who can place your hands upon it. You are the one who can shape what it creates." I want to offer you this paradoxical truth that contradicts conventional wisdom. Thinking about your problems is rarely the path to solving them. Action, even the smallest action, taken from a place of presence rather than mental confusion, carries more transformative power than 1,000 clever analyses. This is not to devalue intelligence or planning, but to recognize that the mind in an anxious or guilty state is not a reliable guide. It is like trying to read a map in a hurricane. Better to put the map away temporarily and simply take the next step on the ground beneath your feet. Better to engage directly with the material of your life rather than with your thoughts about your life. During my time of greatest mental captivity, I composed this saying that I now pass to you. When the mind runs in endless circles, the feet know the direct path. Your overthinking is not a sign of your intelligence, but of your disconnect from the intelligence of the body, the wisdom of direct experience. Your anxiety about the future does not protect you from its uncertainties. It only blinds you to the resources available in the present. Your guilt about the past does not correct your mistakes. It only prevents you from applying their lessons. The antidote is not more thought, but more presence, not more analysis, but more engagement with what is actually before you. Each morning this week, I invite you to practice this simple discipline. Before looking at your phone or computer, before engaging with any media that might trigger the cycle of anxious thinking, Place both feet firmly on the floor. Feel their solid connection with the ground. Place one hand on your heart and one on your abdomen. Feel the rhythm of your breath, the miracle of your continued existence. Then speak these words aloud. This day belongs to presence, not to worry. This moment is real. My thoughts about it are not. Then rise and complete one small, concrete task that has been awaiting your attention. Make your bed with full awareness. Prepare a simple meal mindfully. Write one paragraph of that letter you've been avoiding. Pay one bill with gratitude for the service it represents. The specific action matters less than the quality of attention you bring to it and the fact that you are moving from thought into deed, from abstraction into reality. The order you seek will not arrive through perfect understanding or complete mental clarity. It will emerge through this daily discipline of returning to presence and taking the next indicated action from that ground of being. This is the faith that trusts the wisdom of the body and the direct perception of the senses more than the familiar loops of anxious thought. This is the practice that gradually transforms your relationship with your own mind from prisoner to compassionate witness, from helpless victim to creative participant in your own unfolding life. You have been alone too long. I see the hesitation in your eyes when an invitation arrives. The way your hand hovers over the phone, uncertain whether to reach out or retreat further into familiar solitude. The relief mixed with terror when someone sees through your carefully constructed walls and asks the real question, how are you truly? You have forgotten how to answer. You have forgotten how to be seen. The pandemic forced a physical distance that your heart had perhaps already been practicing for years. Now the world opens again, and you find yourself standing at the threshold, neither fully in nor fully out, wondering if you still remember how to belong anywhere. Wondering if there is still a place that might recognize and receive all of you, not just the polished surface you present on rare social occasions. I have known this suspended state between isolation and connection. After years of spiritual seeking that took me far from conventional society, I returned to Kenya to find myself a stranger in familiar surroundings. My experiences had changed me in ways I could barely articulate, yet the community continued in its established rhythms, expecting me to resume my place as if absence were merely a temporary inconvenience rather than a profound transformation. I would sit in gatherings, hearing the words spoken around me, but unable to join the easy flow of conversation. My silence was mistaken for arrogance, my hesitation for judgment. In truth, I was simply learning a language I had once known fluently, but had somehow forgotten during my time apart. One evening, I was invited to a wedding celebration. My first impulse was to decline, to offer some plausible excuse about prior commitments or ill health. But something within me, a small flame of longing for human warmth, overrode the louder voice of retreat. I arrived late, hoping to slip unnoticed into the gathering. I stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching couples twirl to the music, friends embrace with easy affection, families share private jokes across laden tables. The happiness before me felt simultaneously inviting and alienating, like a feast glimpsed through a window from the cold street outside. A young man approached, someone I did not recognize, and without preamble handed me a cup of sherbet. "You look as I felt last year," he said simply, when I returned from war to find I had forgotten how to be at peace. He did not ask me to speak or explain myself. He simply stood beside me in companionable silence, sipping his own drink, occasionally nodding toward interesting details in the celebration before us. By the end of the evening, I had spoken perhaps 20 words, yet I left feeling more truly seen than I had in months of more conventional interactions. This is the first truth I offer about finding your place again among others. Connection begins not with perfect expression, but with authentic presence. The world is full of people speaking many words while remaining essentially absent. Their bodies occupy space, but their essential selves are hidden behind masks of social convention. True connection, the kind that nourishes rather than depletes, happens when two people dare to be simply and honestly present, even in their awkwardness, even in their uncertainty. It requires not social skill, but courage, not perfect articulation, but willingness to be seen in your imperfect humanity. In the year following my return to society, I discovered something unexpected. The very qualities I feared would exclude me from community. My sensitivity, my periods of introspective silence, my sometimes unusual perspectives were precisely what drew certain people toward me. Not everyone, certainly. Some were clearly discomforted by my failure to conform to expected patterns, but others recognized in my difference something that resonated with their own hidden uniqueness. One by one, these kindred spirits appeared in my life, not in a sudden crowd, but like stars emerging gradually as twilight deepens into night. And I learned that finding your people is not about becoming more acceptable to the general population, but about becoming more fully and unapologetically yourself. Let me share a practice that helped me navigate my return from isolation. Each day, I would engage in one small act of connection, calibrated to my current capacity rather than to some external standard of social success. Some days, when my energy for interaction was minimal, this might be as simple as making eye contact and offering a genuine smile to the merchant from whom I purchased bread. Other days, I might write a short message to someone whose company I had previously enjoyed, expressing a specific quality I appreciated about them. Still other days, when I felt more resourced, I might accept an invitation for tea or extend one of my own. I did not push myself beyond my authentic capacity, but neither did I allow habit or fear to keep me entirely separate. This gradual, intentional practice of reaching out became a bridge between the solitude that had become too familiar and the connection I genuinely craved. In the caravanserai between Damascus and Aleppo, I once observed a group of travelers from widely different lands sharing a common fire. None spoke the other's languages with any fluency. They communicated through gestures, through the universal language of offering food, through occasional words supplemented by expressive faces and hands. What struck me was not their limitation, but their evident enjoyment of this imperfect communion. They laughed at misunderstandings, persisted through confusion, and by morning had established bonds that transcended the barrier of incomprehensible speech. Watching them, I realized how much of my own isolation had been sustained not by external circumstances, but by an internal insistence on perfect understanding. I had been waiting to emerge until I could express myself completely, until I could be absolutely sure of being understood. These travelers asked for no such guarantee. They simply shared what they had, received what was offered, and trusted that something essential could cross the divide between separate lives. I want to offer you this counterintuitive truth that challenges conventional wisdom. Profound connection does not require perfect understanding. In fact, the most meaningful relationships often include significant elements of mystery, of recognized but unresolved difference. Think of the closest connections in your life. Are they not with people who have seen your contradictions, your inexplicable quirks, your areas of confusion, and chosen to remain present anyway? The modern world sells a myth of communication so complete that no shadow of misunderstanding remains. But the most nourishing connections I have known have included ample space for the unsaid, the partially understood, the still emerging. True intimacy is not about removing all mystery, but about remaining faithfully present to a mystery that continues to unfold. During my own season of tentative reemergence, I composed this saying that I now offer to you. The heart that has known true solitude brings to companionship a depth that those who fear aloneness never discover. Your time apart has not merely been dead space or wasted opportunity. It has been a necessary deepening, a vertical journey that now allows for a different quality of horizontal connection. The very sensitivity that makes social interaction sometimes overwhelming for you is also what allows you to notice nuances others miss, to hear the tremor of emotion beneath casual words, to sense the unspoken need behind a practiced smile. These gifts of perception, refined in your solitude, are precisely what the community around you desperately needs, even if it does not know how to ask for them directly. I invite you to practice this simple discipline for reconnecting. Each evening before sleep, reflect on one genuine moment of connection you experienced during the day. It need not have been dramatic or lengthy. Perhaps it was just a moment of real eye contact with a cashier, a brief but authentic exchange with a neighbor, a text message that expressed true feeling rather than mere convention. Hold this moment in your awareness, feeling gratitude for this small bridge between your inner and outer worlds. Then set a clear but gentle intention for one opportunity you will take tomorrow to be genuinely present with another person. Again, calibrate this intention to your actual capacity, not to an idealized notion of what social interaction should look like. This practice acknowledges both your legitimate need for measured steps and your genuine hunger for human connection. It honors the wisdom of gradual emergence rather than sudden exposure. The community you seek is not a perfect circle of ideal companions who will never disappoint or misunderstand you. It is a living, imperfect constellation of authentic relationships, each with its own specific quality of light, its own particular rhythm of presence and distance. Some connections will be as brief as a single meaningful conversation with a stranger on a train. Others will extend across years, deepening through cycles of intimacy and respite, of revelation and privacy. The order you seek will not arrive through finally finding a social circle without flaws or limitations. It will emerge through this daily discipline of showing up as you actually are and allowing others the grace to do the same. This is the faith that trusts the essential bond of shared humanity more than the superficial barriers of perfect understanding. This is the practice that gradually transforms your relationship with community from performance to presence, from exhausting effort to nourishing exchange. Something has been lost between you and the divine. I see the uncertainty in your prayers, the hesitation in your hands as they attempt to form the familiar shape of faith. The words you once spoke with conviction now taste foreign on your tongue. You have asked for a sign and heard only silence in return. You have searched for purpose and found only the blank page of days that must somehow be filled. Dios, donde estás, has become the whisper beneath your breath as you move through motions that once held meaning, but now feel hollow. You wonder if the connection has been severed permanently, if the voice that once guided you has fallen silent, or worse, if it was only ever the echo of your own longing disguised as divine response. I have walked this shadowed valley where God seems to have vanished like morning mist. After the ecstatic union I had known with the divine through my beloved teacher Shams, his sudden disappearance left me in a spiritual wasteland where all previous certainties crumbled to dust. I would prostrate myself in prayer and feel nothing but the hard press of the floor against my forehead. I would open sacred texts and see only black marks on yellowed pages, not the living wisdom they had once conveyed. I would speak God's name and hear it fall flat in the air around me, a sound with no resonance, a call with no response. My students continued to seek guidance from me, unaware that their teacher had become a beggar at the gate of meaning, holding an empty bowl that nothing seemed to fill. One evening, as the last light faded from the sky over Kanya, I walked alone to the edge of the city where the buildings gave way to open fields. A new moon hung in the darkening blue, the thinnest silver crescent, almost invisible. I stopped and gazed at this meager light, feeling it mirrored my own diminished faith, a bare suggestion of illumination against vast darkness. As I stood watching, clouds moved across the sky, and even this slight glow disappeared. I felt a despair so complete it emptied me of words, of thoughts, of everything but the raw fact of absence. And in that absolute emptying, something unexpected occurred. I became aware of the darkness itself as a presence, not as a lack of light, but as a substance with its own texture and meaning. The absence of the moon did not negate the reality of the sky that held both visibility and invisibility in its expanse. And I understood. God had not departed. God had changed form, moving from the brilliant light of revelation to the subtle dark of mystery. This is the first truth I offer about finding your way back to meaning. When the divine seems absent, it has not disappeared but transformed. The God you knew through certainty now seeks relationship through your uncertainty. The purpose that once came as a thunderous command now arrives as a whisper so soft you must grow still to hear it. This is not punishment, but evolution, not abandonment, but invitation to a more mature spiritual intimacy. Just as human relationships deepen through periods of comfortable silence and trusting distance, so too does your relationship with the divine require seasons where the obvious becomes subtle, where finding gives way to seeking, where answers yield to questions that gradually reveal greater truths than any premature certainty could provide. Let me share a practice that became my lifeline during this dark night of the soul. Each morning and each evening, I would light a small oil lamp and place it before me. I would gaze at the flame and speak these simple words. I do not know your face today, but I offer my attention. I cannot feel your presence, but I open to its possibility. I would sit with the flame for the time it takes to draw 20 deliberate breaths, neither demanding an experience nor rejecting what arose. I did not pretend conviction I did not feel. Did not manufacture emotion to fill the silence. I simply made myself available to whatever form of presence might be waiting beyond my expectations. Sometimes nothing changed, and I would rise from this practice as empty as I began. But gradually, over weeks and then months, a different quality of emptiness emerged, more peaceful, more spacious, more alive with subtle energies my former certainty had been too loud to perceive. In the markets of Baghdad, I once witnessed a blind musician tuning his oud before a performance. The noisy crowd continued their transactions around him, paying no attention to the seemingly random notes he plucked as he adjusted each string. A young boy stood watching, fascination on his face. When the tuning was complete and the musician began to play, the boy's expression transformed to one of wonder. Later, I overheard him asking the musician how he could tune the instrument without seeing it. The blind man smiled and said, "When I lost my sight, I thought music had abandoned me. But slowly, I learned to listen to sounds I could never hear when my eyes were filled with the world's distractions. Now I hear music where others hear only noise, harmony where others notice nothing at all." I want to offer you this paradoxical truth that contradicts conventional wisdom. Spiritual clarity often begins in confusion, and renewed purpose is born in periods of apparent meaninglessness. When your old relationship with faith no longer sustains you, it is not because you have failed, but because you are being called to a more nuanced understanding. The map you have followed has brought you to the edge of familiar territory, and now you must develop new senses for navigating terrain that cannot be charted in advance. This is not regression, but advancement, not loss, but transformation of what was into what is becoming. During my months of spiritual disorientation, I composed this saying that I now entrust to you. The cloud that obscures the sun becomes itself illuminated from within. Your current confusion is not an obstacle to genuine connection with the divine. It is the precise place where that connection is being forged in a new and more durable form. Your questions are not evidence of faithlessness, but of faith maturing beyond simple formulas. Your dissatisfaction with ritual is not irreverence, but the stirring of a deeper reverence that longs for direct experience. The very emptiness that seems to separate you from meaning is itself the vessel being prepared for a fuller understanding than you have yet known. If this message resonated in your soul, subscribe and be part of this awakening journey. Each week, I bring wisdom for those who chose the path of true transformation, and leave in the comments, "I am ready for deeper sight." This simple declaration marks the beginning of your journey back home, back to yourself. I invite you to practice this simple discipline for reconnecting with purpose. Each night before sleep, take a blank page and write at the top what gave meaning to this day. Then list 3 specific moments, however small, that held a sense of rightness, of alignment, of quiet purpose. Perhaps it was the way you truly listened to someone who needed to be heard. Perhaps it was a task completed with full attention rather than habitual distraction. Perhaps it was a moment of genuine wonder at something usually taken for granted, the intricate pattern of a leaf or the distant cry of a bird marking time. Do not strain for dramatic spiritual experiences or profound insights. Instead, notice the modest places where meaning already flows quietly through your ordinary life. This practice gradually shifts your attention from grand purpose you fear has been lost to the subtle purpose that has been present all along, waiting for your recognition. In the hills above Kanya, there was a spring known for its healing waters. During a severe drought, the spring dried to a mere trickle, and the ill who had journeyed there turned away in disappointment. An old woman from the nearby village began making daily visits to the diminished spring with a small clay cup. She would wait patiently for the cup to fill, drop by precious drop, a process that took nearly an hour. When asked why she endured such tedious collection when the spring was clearly failing, she replied, "The water has not changed its nature, only its abundance. Less visible does not mean less powerful. My patience honors what remains rather than lamenting what is lost." By the following spring, the waters had returned in fullness. But the woman continued her slow, deliberate gathering, having discovered in scarcity a relationship to the source that abundance had never taught her. The meaning you seek has not evaporated from your life. The purpose you long for has not been withdrawn. Both have simply changed form, requiring from you a different kind of attention, a more subtle engagement, a willingness to value what comes in whispers as much as what once came in shouts. The divine has not stopped speaking. It has simply lowered its voice, inviting you into a more intimate conversation that casual listening cannot detect. The order you seek will not arrive through dramatic revelation or sudden certainty. It will emerge through this daily discipline of attending to modest meanings, of honoring small purposes faithfully executed, of making yourself available to guidance that arrives in unexpected forms. God has not abandoned the conversation. God has simply posed a question you have not yet learned to answer, offered an invitation you have not yet recognized, extended a hand in a direction you have not thought to look. This is the faith that trusts the darkness as much as the light, the confusion as much as the clarity, the question as much as the answer. This is the discipline that gradually transforms your relationship with meaning from dependent child to mature participant, from passive recipient to active co-creator of purpose that sustains not because it is imposing, but because it is authentic, not because it is loud, but because it is true.